Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dave Myslinski from Achieve. I'm an Associate Director on the Strategic Initiatives team, and this is one of our webinars that we're hosting. We'll be doing these about every 6 weeks. And today we're going to be looking at results from a recent polling that we did. It was the third and final one on Are Your Children Ready for College and Career? So a couple of housekeeping things. We'll have Q&A at the end of the presentation, but you can ask questions through your text box throughout, and if it's a technical question, we'll get to that right away. If it's something for the presenters, we'll get to those at the conclusion. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, who is Vice President of Communications, Chad Colby.
Good afternoon. So this is an update of our 2004 survey, a series of surveys we did in 2004 to gauge readiness. In 2004 and this year, we asked college faculty, employers, and students about their level of college and career readiness. This year, we added parents as deciders, and obviously the people who students listen to probably the most about what they need to do to get prepared. We thought it would be important to ask them if they thought their students were ready. And we found some interesting some disconnects between what parents and students, their own students, thought, and then we found some things that they all agreed on. And to go over those results, we've asked Rebecca Nazer, who's the Senior Vice President at Hart Research Associates, and Robert Blizzard, from a partner at Public Opinion Strategies, who conducted our 2004 survey, and they also conducted the survey this year. They are going to explain the results and be available for Q&A after. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca to start the presentation.
Thank you very much, Chad, and thanks to everyone that has joined us this afternoon. This has been a body of research that, as Chad said, has been a long time in the works. If we go to the next slide, there's just a little bit about the methodology and who we surveyed that Chad just went over a little more detail there. You know, as Chad said, over the course of the last year, we started this endeavor back in the fall of last year. And through the year, we have surveyed these 4 different audiences. We started with young people that had recently graduated from public high schools, and then in the spring of this year, we surveyed instructors and employers, and then most recently, parents of kids who recently graduated from public high schools. And in all of these, we had a mix of all the important characteristics among parents and the young people. We had a mix of kids that graduated from high school and went on to 2-year or 4-year college, as well as young people who did not go on to 2-year and 4-year college and went into the workforce or tried to go into the workforce. And we had that same mix among the young people we surveyed. And our focus today is really on what we learned from the parents that we surveyed. But before we dive into that, I really want to hit on a few key points to highlight what we learned from the entire body of research. And as Chad said, we found that there is a disconnect between parents in many ways and students, faculty, and employers when it comes to the perceptions that they hold in terms of how ready young people are for life after high school today, whether that is, involves work or school. And so throughout the deck, we've included a few slides to illustrate that. What we found is that college instructors were really the most critical in terms of how prepared young people are today and the job that high schools are doing in preparing young people. And while employers are less so, they were less critical than the instructors that we interviewed, we've still found that a very significant proportion of the employers that we interviewed told us that most young people that are recently out of high school come to them with large gaps in their preparation for the work world. And another kind of key thing I want to point out in terms of some of the comparisons that we'll make here, and this is kind of at the risk of stating the obvious, but it's just important to keep in mind that, we asked employers and faculty to evaluate the young people that they're interfacing with, either through work or college. And we ask parents to evaluate their own children. So I think that there's a different sort of objectivity lens there between parents and employers and faculty. And we did find that, parents were a little more positive and optimistic about their child's preparedness, with a few exceptions that we will highlight. They're less critical, and in some instances, the parents were even less critical than the young people themselves who had recently graduated from high school. But what we did find among the parents with kind of very stark consistency are significant differences in how parents assess the job their child's high school did in preparing them, depending on what they see as the level of academic expectations that the high school placed on their child. With parents who perceived that the high school placed more expectations or higher expectations or more rigorous expectations, those parents feel more optimistic about their child's preparedness and more optimistic and more positive about the job the high schools did, and vice versa. Parents who think that high schools did not levy high expectations on their kids have the opposite perspective, and we'll go through that in more detail in the deck. And lastly, one of the key findings here, and I don't think this will surprise anyone, is that communication with parents is really very key. And we know from the research that many see significant improvement for the job that high schools are doing today in conveying, not just generally communicating with them, but conveying important information that can be really critical to helping young people sort of be prepared and to lay the foundation for success after high school. So if you want to we'll dive right into the findings if you want to move on to the next slide. Parents are fully aware that what kids need to learn and know today is quite different than what they were expected or needed to know when they were younger. We see here that a full 96% of parents say that it's either very different or somewhat different today than it was 20 years ago when they were younger in terms of what a student needs to learn in high school today to do well. And onto the next slide. In terms of, we'll see in terms of, that's sort of the point of departure, that parents understand kind of the landscape has changed and it's a different world today than it was 20 years ago. In terms of how well prepared parents feel that their children are coming out of high school, parents of kids who went on to college are pretty optimistic, with 73% saying that they feel that their kids are extremely or very well prepared for what they're going to face ahead. And what you see here on the graphic is that they're actually even significantly more optimistic or think that their kids are more prepared than the college students themselves. So 73% feel their kids are at least very well prepared, compared to 53%. Want to go back one slide, please? There we go, thanks. Compared to 53% of the college students themselves who felt extremely or very well prepared. It's a small proportion of both audiences, both parents and young people, who feel that they weren't well prepared and had large gaps or were completely unprepared, 4% of parents and 13% of students. On to the next slide, we also, again, looked at parents of young people that did not continue on to college, as well as those young adults themselves. And here we find a slightly different situation. We find that the parents actually were less optimistic about how well prepared their kids were for life after high school. 45% feel that their kids are at least very well prepared, compared to over half, or 56% of young adults that recently came out of high school and went on into the work world. And again, small proportions of both audiences feeling that they weren't prepared at all for what lies ahead. I will point out that on both of those slides, those numbers are significantly different than what we learned from employers and from college faculty that are engaging with young people right out of high school. They felt at very high rates that kids were unprepared for what they were going to face, either in the work world or in college. We wanted to get a sense of the level of academic expectations that parents felt that high schools placed on their kids. And here you see that roughly half feel that their child's high school placed sort of moderate expectations on them and that they were somewhat challenged through high school. Only a third say that high expectations were placed on their child by the high school, and 17% say low expectations. This is actually remarkably close to what the young people, when we surveyed them a year ago, told us. 26% of the young people felt that their school placed high expectations on them and that they were significantly challenged, and 54% said moderate and 20% said low expectations. So again, similar perceptions here among the parents and the kids in terms of the expectations their high schools placed on them. On to the next slide. And interestingly, while only a third of parents say that the expectations that were placed on their child were high and that they were challenged, many are giving their kids' high schools pretty good marks in terms of how satisfied they are with the job that their high school did overall in preparing their son or daughter for success after high school. You see here that 84% are somewhat or very satisfied. 4 in 10 are very satisfied with the job the high school did, and only 16% express dissatisfaction on this measure. On to the next slide. This is, again, a place where we'll point out the difference between parents, employers, and the college instructors that we interviewed. This is that same metric, or that same measure of how satisfied you are in general. Again, here, important to point out that we are asking parents, how satisfied they are as it relates to their own, their child and their own lives, and we're asking employers and college instructors to assess high schools generally. But again, we see quite a stark difference here. Only 35% of college instructors express satisfaction with the job that high schools are doing today. Only 3% are very satisfied. That's virtually no college instructors. And greater than 1 in 5 are very dissatisfied. That dark red line on the far right bar with the job that high schools are doing, preparing young people for college today. Employers, again, a little more optimistic, 56% expressing satisfaction compared to 44% dissatisfaction. And then we've talked about the parent numbers already, 84% expressing satisfaction compared to 16% who are not satisfied. So significant differences here in satisfaction. But you'll see as we get into some of the other areas where different, so the fault lines are for parents in terms of the different perceptions they have. If we move on to the next slide, we wanted to get a sense from the parents that we surveyed about the job that they perceive their child's high school to do along 3 sort of basic dimensions. And this will cover the next several slides. But the first dimension is specific subject areas or skill areas that we typically associate with high school education and beyond. And what we see here, and it's on this slide, on the next slide, is that really parents express very, very high rates of satisfaction with the job that high schools are doing in these specific skill areas. You see that greater than roughly 3 and 4 or higher in all of these skill areas. Parents say they're satisfied with the job their child's high school did, whether it's computers or working as part of a team or even verbal and written communication, math. And then on to the next slide, it's just a continuation here. But again, we continue to see very, very high rates of satisfaction among parents with the job that the high school did in these specific skill areas. You see here, as we get to the lower bars on this slide, that there are roughly 3 in 10 parents express dissatisfaction with the job that their child's high school did in work and study habits and conducting research, roughly a quarter in critical thinking and comprehension of complicated materials. One thing I would point out that's not on the slide here is that those those skill areas that are at the bottom 3 or 4 bars on this slide are also the skill areas that both employers and college faculty pointed out as the areas that they would most like to see high schools do a better job in preparing young kids for the future, whether it be work or college. So there is some consistency here in terms of the skill set that parents, employers, and faculty see as needing high schools to do a better job. On to the next slide. We also wanted to assess parents' perceptions of the jobs that their child's high school is doing in sort of what I would refer to as sort of more sort of macro level type things or big picture things in preparing their kids for a future after high school. And as you see here again, very high levels of satisfaction and very fairly low levels or low proportions of parents who feel that their child's high school fell short on these things. So 8 in 10 parents feel that their child's high school did at least a fairly good job, just basically providing them with the education that would enable them to be able to go on to college and succeed at college level work, helping them develop confidence and maturity and, preparing for a good job and career after high school. All at high levels, parents feel that their child's high school did a pretty good job at these things. But again, this is when we look at parents in the aggregate, and this is where we begin to see very significant differences in parents' perceptions of the jobs their child's high school did when we break it out by the different experiences that parents had. And if we go on to the next slide, it's our first kind of very real indication of that. And what we did is we broke parents out into those that said their child's high school placed high expectations on them, their child's high school placed moderate expectations on them, and their child's high school placed low expectations on the child. And here, and you'll see this again and again as we go through the deck, here what we see is that parents who think that their kids were not subjected, to moderate or high expectations, really feel that their school fell short on a lot of these very important sort of big picture actions or things, preparations for the future. So at very high levels, we see, over half on all of these parents think that their child's high school fell short in these important things that can help kind of lay a foundation for success in the future. On to the next slide. We wanted to also, and this is the third kind of broad area that we wanted to assess the job that high schools did according to parents. And this is an area of sort of providing certain opportunities, creating challenges or rigorous environment for children. So things like providing opportunities to take AP or college level classes, challenging students and setting very high standards, encouraging students to take the hardest or the highest level classes or the most advanced level classes. And here again, when we look in the aggregate, what we see is that at pretty high levels, parents think that their kids' high school did a pretty good job. If we go to the next slide, and these are some additional things that fall into this category. So encouraging parent involvement. Still, over half of all parents feel that their child's high school is doing a pretty good job on these things. And these all relate to sort of creating an environment where children are challenged to achieve at high levels in high school. Still, if you look at the data points in the right column there, on this slide, still majority, but there are a significant minority of parents along some of these dimensions that feel that their students' high school fell short. Real-world learning is an area that 43% of parents feel their child's high school fell short, and that is an area that emerged in among all four of the audiences as an area that really parents, students, and college faculty and employers all think that more opportunities for real-world learning is an area that would really help keep kids engaged in high school, but also prepare them for the future. And then if we go on to the next slide, here again we've divided parents into these three groups. And again, what we see here in very, very stark terms is that parents who feel that their kids were in a high school situation or environment where the expectations were low and it was easy for them to just kind of slide by at very, very high levels feel that their child's high school fell short on these. Majorities of parents in that group think that their child's high school fell short. compared to, if you contrast that on the far left side of the slide with parents whose kids, who high school exposed them or subjected them to high expectations, it's really quite a stark contrast, almost a mirror image in terms of the data, in terms of whether they evaluate their child's high school as doing a good job on these things and challenging their kids, or falling short and not doing a good job. So transitioning from that, the question is, you know, what do parents want for their children in high school? And what this slide demonstrates is that really parents, you know, of all stripes, whose children experienced all kinds of different academic environments, want higher expectations. They want higher standards for their children at very high levels. Solid majorities, roughly 7 in 10, 8 in 10 parents whose kids were had low expectations in high school feel that higher academic standards would have helped in preparing them for the world after high school, whether that involved college or work. And then if we move to the next slide, on a related note, there are other things that that parents feel would have, at high rates, would have done quite a bit to help improve their children for success after high school. And again, this spans, you know, all different parents. Roughly 6 in 10 parents, whether their children were experiencing high, moderate, or low expectations, say that requiring kids to pass 4 years of math, including Algebra 2, would have helped in preparing them for the future. Majorities between 50 and 60% say that requiring all students to pass biology and chemistry and physics would have helped a great deal to prepare them for the future. So one area where there's striking consistency is that regardless of how they assess the job that their child's high school did, parents really want to see their kids subjected to more rigorous higher standards and more rigorous coursework. On to the next slide, please. And then finally, very consistent theme here, requiring that students pass exams at the end of the year in math and writing to actually graduate from high school. Again, we see that greater than 6 in 10 parents and, you know, 2/3 of parents whose children experience moderate and low expectations think that these kinds of testing requirements would actually help in terms of preparing, doing more to prepare their kids for the future. Next slide, please. So we gave parents a list of, as I mentioned earlier, a list of potential steps that could be taken to help ensure that when kids do graduate from high school, they are well prepared for life after high school. And we gave a very similar list to every audience that we surveyed throughout the full project in the 4 years. And again, like I said earlier, they were allowed to pick 2 or 3 of these. And real-world learning comes up on the top of the list consistently, with over half of all parents identifying that as something that could really make a difference. You know, things to keep kids engaged in terms of the way the curriculum is designed, as well as individual guidance. And then down from there, at lower percentages, you know, providing opportunities to take higher level AP and college level courses and things like that. But this is
Hey, this is Robert. I just want to jump in real quick on this one, just because I think this is important here on the providing real-world learning opportunities. Is, you know, rated up here as, you know, one of the highest for the most important, ensure that students leave high school well prepared. I just point that out because, you know, in previous slides that we've gone through here, just keep in mind that when we ask folks to rate the job that their child's high school did in the following areas, even among those who had high expectation high schools, the real-world learning experience was the lowest. So this providing real-world learning opportunities, you know, that seems to be kind of an interesting theme here when you look at a couple of these questions.
Next slide, please. So switching gears now a little bit, we also wanted to understand how parents assess the job that high schools are doing, communicating generally, but also on some specific areas. And here, what you see from this slide is that virtually no parent out there thinks that their high school was communicating too much with them. 55% say too little, and 43% say about right. And then you see here in the right-hand side, we've broken this out by some segments of the parent population. And there are groups that say too little at even higher rates. Again, if we look at the expectations that were placed on their children in high school, as we move sort of down the grade from high to moderate to low, the proportion of parents who feel the high school communicated too little increases. Same thing with high school achievement. I mean, these are self-reported, but we asked parents roughly, what the achievement level at their student's high school was, above average, average, or below average. And again, you find the same thing as you move down that continuum. At pretty big leaps and bounds, higher proportions of parents report that high schools communicated too little. And then, please go on to the next slide. We wanted to get into some specifics, not just communication in general, but how the high schools are doing from the mind's eye of the parents in terms of helping parents to be ready and prepared to help their students as they work their way through high school and prepare for either college or the work world after high school. And here, again, if you look at the numbers in the aggregate and you just look at the totals, again, I think intensity is important here. 64% of all parents say that their child's school did at least a fairly good job, but I think it's important to note that only 28% said their student's high school did a very good job on this very important and very basic, when you think about it, task of helping parents understand what their children need and what they need to accomplish in high school to be prepared for life after high school. And then similarly to the previous slide, what we find is that some of those subsets at much higher rates think that their child's high school fell short in terms of helping them understand how they can better help their children be prepared at the end of the day when they walk out that high school door for life after high school. And then we wanted to understand some very specific elements of what it means to help kids and families and parents be prepared and understand what they need to know to help their children be prepared after they leave high school. And so here you see along these 6 dimensions, we asked how good of a job did your child's high school do? And well, on certain things like clear information on what's needed to graduate from high school, you've got almost 6 in 10 parents saying that the high school did this really well. But still, you've got 43% seeing room for improvement on that very basic thing of providing information of what kids need to know just to graduate from high school. And from there on out, there's a majority of parents feel that their child's high school could have improved on all of these. So clear information on what's needed to get into college, updates to know if your child is on track, understanding the courses they should be taking very early on in the high school process so that you can prepare for that and be ready for that and ensure that your kids are on track. And then parental involvement in choosing courses and helping them ensure that they're taking the most rigorous courses that they can take. And then the next slide is just an illustration of what we've kind of seen throughout the deck, which is, again, we see very significant differences in how parents see and think about the job that their child's high school did, depending on the sort of expectations level that they perceive the high school placed on the child, with parents of kids that went to high expectation schools assessing their high schools as doing good jobs, and most thinking that they did a good job in all of these areas. But as you move down that continuum again, once you get to low expectation high schools, you really find that it's a very, very significant majority. I mean, it's 70 to 80% on all of these measures of parents think that there was room for improvement in their child's high school in terms of providing this information that's important to helping kids succeed. So I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it at that. And if Robert, if you have anything to add, please go.
Back over to the Achieve folks to at least get those who've probably been waiting patiently to ask some questions or go from there.
Great, thank you. So we have the ability to ask questions through the online portal, but also we'll open up the phone lines in a second if you want to ask questions that way as well. All right, and we got one question asking, did the sample include only parents of children who completed high school?
Yes, it was, and it was only children, parents of children who completed public high school, public charter or regular public high school. And that mirrors what we did with the young people that we interviewed last fall too.
Great, thank you. And I got another question, and it looks like asking through the online portal is the best way to go about it. One question is, what states participated in the survey?
The survey is every state. It's a nationally representative sample of parents of kids that graduated during that 4-year period.
Okay, and one question, did you ask who parents trust information from the most? Because I know traditionally we say teachers, but was that something that was included in the survey?
It was not, unfortunately. I do not believe, I'm just double checking, but no, we didn't include a question on who within the school they trust in terms of.
Yeah, this is Robert. I mean, maybe a little anecdotally, but from other work we've done for Achieve in the past and other just education work that we've done, you know, I think you're right. Teachers are generally very trustworthy, but the other group of folks that are pretty trustworthy on these types of issues are actually a lot of other parents to whoever asked that question. Some other parents that have maybe gone through you know this before. Or if you have someone who's a senior, parent of a senior in high school. You know, if you're a parent of someone who's in, let's say, 10th grade, and you know that other parent, you know, usually that's a good information source for a lot of people. But by and large, most of the survey work we've done for Achieve and others in the past has shown that teachers, you know, are I guess the most trustworthy communication source.
Great. Another one is asking if you have any information on the extent to which kids whose parents were surveyed had access to guidance counselors.
Not through this survey. I don't know if that was a part of the focus groups that were done with the kids, Robert. Do you know?
No, no, because I'm stuttering along here. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you. Not something I think we've really looked at before.
We have another question who's asking about over time. So we did these surveys about 10 years ago. Can you talk a little bit about perceptions as those changed since the last time?
Yeah, Yeah, first, two caveats. The first one is that we didn't do the parents 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we did young people, recent graduates, faculty, and employers. So sadly, we don't have a way to, we don't have a baseline for the parent data, which is unfortunate. And the other caveat is that we did use, with the evolution of time and the way things have rapidly changed over the last 10 years, we used a different methodology this time around. We did a mixed methodology for the surveys, phone and online, whereas 10 years ago it was strictly a phone survey. So in interpreting change in the data, you have to be somewhat, put a little asterisk by it, but I still think we can make generalizations. And what we saw in the surveys with all three audiences, faculty, employers, and the recent graduates, is that really like the trend line among all three was down in terms of whether kids are as prepared today, or satisfaction with high schools, or rating the jobs that high school did on some of these important measures and metrics. The trend line was consistently down, the perception being that kids are, more kids are leaving high school with gaps in preparation. High schools are being assessed as not doing as good a job, it was a pretty, when you looked at all of it in combination, it was a bleak assessment, I think, by all three audiences.
Okay, and what was the most surprising or counterintuitive finding from the survey that you found? If there was anything.
That's a good question. Yeah. This is Robert. I'll go first. I don't necessarily think counterintuitive, but I think the thing that's most surprising to me is not necessarily just from the parent survey, but really how stark the difference is in terms of satisfaction on a number of different attributes across all this research between the audiences of parents, employers, and college instructors. You knew there'd be, going into this, you knew there'd be some differences. You knew that there would be, some pressure points back and forth, but to the extent of disagreement, really, is the word I'm looking for, between how parents view a lot of this stuff, employers and college instructors, I was a little taken back by that. To me, that was probably the most surprising from the course of this research over the summer. So Rebecca may have different opinions.
Oh yeah, I agree, and I think it'd be really interesting to have and I think instructive to have the capacity to get underneath that and understand. There's so many moving parts that influence what. Is it because of the way, why is it that parents, knowing everything we know, right, with just what we read in the media about preparedness and where we stand as a nation compared to other nations, and, it is fascinating that parents have much more rosier view. Not all parents, obviously. What we saw is that certainly not all parents, but a fair number of parents have a pretty rosy view of kind of, what they think, how they think their kids are coming out of public high schools. The other thing that I found interesting, and again, if anything, it just raises more questions than answers questions, is we did, for the parent and the student surveys, we did oversamples of African Americans and Hispanics for both, so that we would have enough sample size in those groups to take a really close look at them. And we didn't really find some of the stark differences along those dimensions that we had, I guess, speculated or hypothesized that we might find.
Great. Are there any more questions? It doesn't look like there are any in the queue right now, so if you have one, flag that down for us and we'll ask that. While you're thinking of those, I do want to point out on the screen now is there are links to the older versions of the survey, or the prior two versions of the surveys. These are live on our website. Feel free to peruse them. And I think that's it. So, we have one question asking the presenters, and it's Chad. Do you want to the names of the presenters?
Oh, Rebecca Nazer and Robert Blizzard.
Okay, great. And we'll have this PowerPoint deck available on the Achieve website within the next couple of days. But also, as we wrap up, I want to ask that everyone, when they close out of this, a survey will pop up. Please fill that out. We do take your feedback seriously, so we would love to hear what you thought and any suggestions you have for us. All right. Well, I'd like to thank our presenters and thank Chad and all of you for joining us today. And we'll have another webinar coming up in the beginning of the year, and we'll send out information on that shortly. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.